Good morning to you, ladies and gentlemen. Good Sunday morning to you. We're going to take a Sunday morning drive because I haven't got anything on my agenda today. Someone reminded me of something I said here a few days ago, and I've got nothing to do and all day long to do it. But what I thought I'd do this morning, we'll just reminisce, or I'll reminisce, and you can listen while we drive along here on Park Road 4. That goes by Inks Lake State Park. It's a reasonably pretty drive. I like it. It's not much traffic normally, and so here we go. But what I want to touch on this morning while I'm reminiscing is 1950s Texas, South Texas, growing up in Texas, little town called Kennedy, Kennedy, one N, not two, Kennedy, Texas, between Corpus Christi, Texas and San Antonio, Texas, on Highway 181. At that time, the population was probably around, I'm going to guess 2,000 to 2,500. It was kind of an oil boom town at that time. Again, we're talking about, we're going to go to my first grade experience and around that era. We're going to go in and out of the sun too, because this road winds all around, just makes S's and stuff. So we'll go into the sun for a second and then back out of it, into it and out of it. But having said that, I started the first grade in 1951 in Kennedy, Texas. We did not have pre-K. We did not have kindergarten. I have never stayed with a babysitter in my entire life. They did not have daycare centers then at all. If there was any daycare that I knew, it was a friend of the family or a family member or somebody retired or whatever that kept the children. But I don't know of anybody that had babysitters. I don't recall that at all. But my first grade teacher was Ms. Williams, and we used to we'd have a little pallet where after lunch we'd take a nap and so forth. I don't know that I ever took a nap, but we laid there anyway. But that was the way we did, and you had plenty of time to play. There was a lot of things centered around the playground. I remember that. And the first grade reader was, I think it was called Dick and Jane, or The Adventures of Dick and Jane, and it was pretty corny. But I could already read a little bit because I had two older sisters and one older brother, 4 and 6 years older than me, and I would check out their books, when I was not in school or before I started school. So when I got to school, I knew how to count and I knew the alphabet and all that kind of stuff. So I was, first grade was basically boring to me as far as I can recall, but I can remember this guy. I won't give last names, I'll just give first names. There was a guy named Dave. He was the son of the general manager for Schlumberger in that area. They were pretty well to do, upper middle income, had a nice big home in Kennedy right on the outskirts, nice place. And when he came to the first grade, first of all, he got out of a nice car, which I don't think I was impressed with. I certainly didn't know what it was. I just knew it was different. And he had toys. He had an army tank. I remember that. He brought an army tank. And it was the most realistic looking army tank I had ever seen in my life. And did I covet it? Oh, unbelievably, man. I would have killed to have that little army tank because I had basically nothing. And but anyway, back then there was a toy manufacturer, and I can't remember the name of it, that made realistic army toy looking stuff and cars and stuff. And I may think of the name of it as I go, because I did finally acquire a few of them. A year or two later, we went to San Antonio, Texas, and I found them at a toy store in downtown San Antonio. And that was a big event to go to San Antonio shopping. That was about a twice a year event. But that was 60 miles away, by the way. That was a major trip. Because back then, when I started school, first grade, our family car, or well, my mother's car was a 1947 Ford Coupe, and Dad had a 49 Dodge pickup, a red one. And as I recall, the bed was black, cab was red. I could be wrong on that. But so it be it. The first grade moved through basically easily, but of course I had a friend, and I probably had several, but I just remember one that when school was out, I never asked permission to do things. I just did them, I mean, the primary school was over on the one section of town on the edge, and then you had to walk, I don't want to say, I don't know what direction it was, might have been north, I don't know, but you had to walk one direction to get to the downtown area, and then you had to cross town to get to this friend of mine's house. His name was Bobby. And there were many times when school was out that, well, I would just go follow Bobby to his home, and we'd play and do things, and somehow miraculously my mother would find me and take me home, and she never got after me that I recall. She never said, well, you should have told me you were going, I don't remember any of that. All I remember is out of the clear blue, my mother would show up and say, let's go, and I'd say, okay. Away we'd go back out in the country. We lived 3 miles out of town on a farm, and so there was really no one to play with out there, particularly when I was younger, before I started school, because my older brother and sisters were in school, and so I kind of had to make up games and entertain myself. But anyway, so Bobby Dahl was my friend, and I would just go home, follow him home like a dog, and I never thought about it. Obviously he didn't either, and it was the way it was. And certainly there was no fear of sexual predators and all of that stuff. That didn't even exist, or they might have existed, but nobody knew it. There was certainly no problem in Kennedy, Texas, because back then in the 50s, had you done something unusual like that to a child, they wouldn't have found your bones, and you wouldn't have gone to court. This thing wouldn't have been tied up in court, and they wouldn't have worried about your rights and all this stuff. You'd have just been dead. That's the end of that crap. You just didn't fool around back in the 50s, because I won't get into some of the old sheriffs we had and stuff, but it was people took care of their own business, and they took care of it fairly quickly. And back then, men could be pretty rough. It wasn't, you gave a man your word, you stood by it, or bad things could happen to you. Having said that, how does that get back to the first grade? I don't know. But it was a great time as far as doors being locked and all that. I don't remember that. I think I've told you about going into the little drugstore we had. It had the little stools and the little bar where you could get ice cream and sandwiches, hamburger and stuff like that. And I would just go in there and eat, and I think I signed a ticket there. I might have. I don't recall. But somehow the bills got taken care of, because nobody ever told me not to do it, or don't abuse the privilege or whatever. Things just got taken care of. But of course on the farm there was always work to do, always. There were talk about chores, we had them, and it was never ending, year round. But it was a good life. It was a simpler life in a lot of ways. Main thing is there was no news really. We got a couple of channels on TV. Of course, we did get a news channel out of San Antonio, and but TV was not a big part of our life at all. I mean, that includes my parents. I mean, that TV, we had one. We got a TV when I think we got our first TV in about 1953, 54 in there, and it was black and white, weighed about, I don't know, probably 60 pounds, had a little maybe 9 or 10 inch screen. It had tubes and all that stuff, vacuum tubes and all that stuff, but it wasn't very entertaining. There was I used to watch one called Winky Dink and You, or some stupid crap like that. And then there were other simple of course they had other programs for kids like Howdy Doody. It's Howdy Doody time. I thought that was stupid as crap. And And then they had this guy on there, I can't remember his name. I think he was supposed to be an Indian. He would always say Cowabunga or some crap. And then also they had the Mouseketeers, which another show I thought was totally irrelevant, totally stupid. Hardly ever watch. Yeah, I did watch it for the opening occasionally, because they would introduce all the Mouseketeers or whatever they were. And one of them was Annette Funicello. And God almighty, I thought she was the prettiest thing on the planet. And she ended up marrying Frankie Avalon, I think. But having said that, and had about 10 kids, a lot of kids, I remember that. But anyway, that was the beginning of life for me. And is that different from the beginning of life for children today? Sure. You know, I mean, they're born, they got cell phones, TV, it's just there. Everything's there. I mean, they never are not without some form of entertainment. They never have to be to entertain themselves. As far as I know, it's all there. You know, anything you can dream of is at your fingertips. Is that good or bad? It's just the way it is. I mean, get on, get off, or get out of the way, because it's here. But we're just cruising a Sunday morning drive, and I'm just thinking about my childhood. We had good times and bad times when I was growing up. I remember, when we made a good crop, things were good. And when we didn't, or when we lost a crop that was in the field that we couldn't get to because of rain, that was not good. I remember my parents really feeling down, because they knew that. See, the way it worked then was you had a line of credit at the bank. The bank there was called the First Nichols National Bank, the Nichols family, and the Franklins, of course. I guess, I'm not sure, but. What you would do, in the good year, you would pay the loan back. In the bad year, you would borrow. And hopefully, between those two extremes, you were able to have a little hay in the barn, so to speak. You were a little bit ahead. It seemed like we did okay. We got a new car, a brand new car, I remember that, in 1954. I think 1954, it was a Ford four-door. It was a light green bottom with a dark green top, automatic. I couldn't believe that. Automatic transmission. Of course, no air conditioner. I don't think they started putting air conditioners in cars until about 1956. And this guy, a friend of mine named Dave, whose father was manager at Schlumberger, they bought a 56 Pontiac, and it had an air conditioner, but it was just a big box in the trunk of the car that took up most of the trunk. And I don't know how it worked. I just know it had these little ducts that came up out of the trunk and blew into the car, and it sounded like a freight train when it was on, but it did blow cold air. But that was kind of growing up in Texas in the 50s. I'm going to add this. I've got a playlist for that era, and it's pretty interesting, at least for me, because to think about how it's changed and what I'm doing now. I mean, the fact that I'm driving this truck down the highway that's got a 6 or 8 speed transmission, air conditioning, radio, and all kind of stuff. Even though, even our 47 Ford Coupe my mother had a radio, and my cousin, who was about 4 or 5 years older than I was, he told me one time. He said, "Rusty, you know how that radio works?" And I said, "Man, I ain't got a clue." And he said, "Well, what it is, there's actually some little people in there, and you just can't see them." And I thought, no kidding. I thought, no joke, man. I mean, I believed it. I mean, I believed that as much as I believed that a rock was a rock. I'm not kidding you. That was it, man. And so what I would do is we had a flashlight. And I would go out and I would climb up under the dash of the car, and I would shine that flashlight in there trying to see them. I never did see them. And I mentioned that to my cousin one time, and he said, "Well, they're hard to see." He said, "You got to catch them, sometimes late at night or something, or, when it's dark." Hell, I did, man. I'd go out there at night, get in that car and climb up under there, and I'd look for them damn people like you look for mice. I never saw them. I still think they're there. I still believe the little boogers are in there. I don't even know how my radio works now, but I don't want to get into that. But yeah, that was another time. And, I had an uncle that could do magic tricks, sort of. He'd put a coin in his hand, and then he'd pull it out from behind your ear, or, behind your back or whatever. Anyway, I thought that was cute. And else. And yeah, we had some good times. I mean, we did. We used to play a game called Kick the Can. I've mentioned that in other videos. You know, and that was tough. And when you were it, so to speak, and Kick the Can, you could be it forever. You know what I mean? Because you know we could hide on 1,200 acres of land, and we did. But and what else? You know, I've talked about firecrackers and stuff, and I talked about getting my Cushman Eagle. I had a Cushman Eagle when I think I got that when I was 12, so that would have been 1957. Yeah, it was a Cushman Eagle, 8 horsepower, had dual chrome exhaust. God dang. Briggs & Stratton 4-cycle engine. It run about top speed about 65. It had a speedometer on it. It actually had a speedometer. No fuel gauge, but you could just take the gas cap off and look down in there. It held about a gallon or a half or whatever. But I didn't worry about gasoline because we had a 550-gallon tank of gasoline we used for our equipment. And I'd just go out there and fill up anytime I wanted to. Same way when I got a car, I'd just go out there and fill up. You know, gas was 12 cents a gallon or whatever it was. It wasn't a big deal. You didn't even think about it. Nobody did. But it was a fun time. You know, we used to go to, later on when I got into high school, we'd go to dances on Friday nights and Saturday nights and stuff. Nobody ever got into trouble. You know, back then, it may still be this way in a few places in the U.S. I doubt it. But if you got into trouble, and if it was something, you know, kind of minor, you know, like if they caught you out drinking beer or you know, doing something stupid, you know, they didn't give you a ticket and haul you to jail and do all that crap. You know, they just said, you know, we're going to tell your parents. And they did. And don't think that didn't bring hell upon your body. You just didn't want your parents to know what you had been doing. But this is Buckhannon Dam, a little community unincorporated. I'll end the video here in a minute. I'm going to turn left and we're going to be kind of going into the sun, so I'll probably end the video soon. Neat little community there. They got a little kind of like farmer's market there on the left. You can get tomatoes and different things. They're not cheap though. Well, of course, probably shouldn't be. Go ahead, lady. I'm in no hurry. On the right there's a landscaping deal. But anyway, as far as growing up, I really had a good, because before I went to school, I was free as a bird. I mean, when my brother and sisters were in school during the school year for 9 months or whatever it happened to be, I promise you, I went everywhere on our land. Just walking by myself. I had an old collie dog named Bill, and I'd just go. Me and old Bill, man, away we'd go. I remember, I can still in my mind picture reaching straight out and petting that dog. And I know Bill wasn't 6 feet tall, but I have that picture in my mind. Yeah, but he'd go with me. That was my dog. And I'd be gone all day. I mean, I'd leave, and I don't remember anyone ever spanking me or telling me not to do it. But I would follow creek beds all around everywhere. But of course, it was easy to follow a creek bed one direction, then turn around and come back. And when I would come back is if I got hungry, or if it was starting to get dark. Because around where I lived then, the coyotes would start howling just right at dusk. And yeah, that would get your attention. They weren't aggressive, you didn't have to worry about them attacking you, but they'd get all around you and you'd hear them. They make the craziest bark, man, and they howl and they make that yippee crazy stuff. The noises they make scare the crap out of you. They don't have to attack, they scare you to death. As far as mountain lions, bear, and all that, we didn't have any of that. As far as rattlesnakes, they were around. I saw maybe 2 or 3 growing up, that's it. Never knew of anybody getting bitten by a rattlesnake ever. So, everybody thinks Texas is covered with rattlesnakes. It's not. There are places where there's more than others. Sweetwater, Texas has more than others because there's a large population, and that's what the snakes feed off of, so that's where they go. What else can I tell you about growing up before I end the video, or living in Texas? I just have to say that it was a free way to grow up. It was a small town. I was not even in the small town. That's why I like the way of life I have now, is because it's just, there's no traffic around here, or very little. I don't do traffic very well. And what else can I tell you? That's about it, guys. I mean, I could. It's hard to remember all the little details, or that's a long time ago. You figure it's 68 years ago. I was in the first grade. That's a long time. A lot of dead brain cells up in there. But with that being said, guys, let's see, how long has this been going? A long time? I don't know. Been a while, but doesn't matter. I'll end it now. But anyway, I'll post I probably posted a RV video before this, but we got more to go on that RV show from Round Rock. I'll do those. And then every now and then I'll throw in a driving video. I'll just do what I normally do, so you'll know what to expect. Variety is the spice of life. Having said that, guys, adios amigos. Bye-bye. Buy anything you want, anytime. But if you think about it, use the link to Amazon products in the description of all of my videos. Why? Because I get a small commission. Doesn't cost you a penny. What else? Drink plenty of water, stretch, walk, take deep breaths, do all those things to keep yourself healthy, so you'll be able to enjoy getting out on a Sunday morning drive or whatever, and kind of get out with them, you know what I mean? But with that in mind, adios, at ease, carry on. Bye-bye, guys.